Welcome to the Unraveling the Scriptures channel. Many of you are already familiar with the incredible journey of Abraham, the peoples that descended from him, and even his relatives. But have you ever stopped to think about where Abraham truly came from? What is the real origin of the people to which he belonged? In this video, we're going to dive into a fascinating and mysterious story, the origin of the Chaldeans, the ancient Semitic people to whom Abraham belonged. Discover secrets you may not yet know about this civilization and how it shaped the history of one of the greatest biblical patriarchs. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video with your friends who are also passionate about biblical stories and legendary figures. Chaldeans, the biblical origin of Abraham's people. As we know, Abraham was the patriarch and ancestor of many peoples in the Middle East. This brings up the following question: to which people did Abraham belong? What was his origin, his genetic lineage, and where did his father Terah and his grandfather Nahor come from? This question often arises, but the Bible itself provides the answer. Though Abraham and Lot gave rise to various Arab tribes, and Abraham, in particular, fathered the Israelites, the Bible reveals that Abraham had a specific origin. He belonged to a well-defined people, the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans inhabited the region corresponding to modern-day Iraq and parts of Syria, in areas near ancient Assyria. However, their main area of settlement was the land we now know as Iraq. In antiquity, this region was called the land of Shinar. Interestingly, the name Shinar may remind us of Shem, who was the ancestor of the Semitic peoples, including the Chaldeans. This leads us to reflect on how Abraham's Semitic heritage influenced both his people and the many descendants that came from him, both Israelites and Arabs. Abraham, then, was not only a founder of nations but part of a long lineage of Semitic peoples who already inhabited and influenced ancient Mesopotamia. The name Shem in Aramaic and other Semitic languages refers to the ancestor of all Semitic peoples. Iraq, known in antiquity as the land of Shinar, received this name due to the presence of the Chaldeans, who were descendants of Shem. Therefore, the land that is now Iraq is biblically called the land of Shinar, because of this ancestral connection. The Chaldeans, to whom Abraham belonged, were Semites and direct descendants of Shem. Specifically, Abraham came from the city of Ur of the Chaldeans. This confirms that he was a Chaldean, and thus genetically and ethnically a Semite. There is a common misconception that Abraham was a Sumerian, but in reality, he was a Semite, not a Sumerian. The Chaldeans were Semitic peoples who descended from one of the sons of Shem. Shem had several important descendants: Aram, who became the ancestor of the Arameans, and Ashur, who gave rise to the Assyrians. The similarity between the names Ashur and Assyria is striking and is reflected in various Semitic languages, including Hebrew and Aramaic. This resemblance is also recognizable in English translations of the Bible. This linguistic connection provides an interesting clue to the cultural and linguistic heritage that ties these ancient peoples together. Aram was the father of the Aramean people, the Aramean tribes that inhabited the region corresponding to modern-day Syria. It's important not to confuse Syria with Assyria, as, despite the similarity in names, they refer to different peoples. In antiquity, the people living in what is now Syria were called Arameans, descendants of Aram. The Assyrians, on the other hand, were descendants of Ashur. As for the Chaldeans, they were descendants of Arphaxad. Arphaxad was the ancestor of the Chaldeans, and his name has a curious origin. Arphaxad comes from an ancient term, possibly Aramaic or Assyrian, which literally means, he who sweeps the plain, a combination of the terms Rapik and Zad. Some traditions interpret the name as a reference to the moment of Arphaxad's birth, suggesting that when Shem fathered him, he may have been sweeping a plain, or perhaps his mother gave birth while in that environment. This linguistic and cultural curiosity is fascinating because it shows how ancient names often carry deep or poetic meanings, reflecting aspects of everyday life or the beliefs of the time. It also highlights the importance of understanding the origins of these Semitic peoples, who played a crucial role in the history of the Middle East, such as the Chaldeans, Arameans, and Assyrians, each descending from different sons of Shem. Arphaxad was the first son Shem had after the flood. The Bible tells us that Arphaxad was born 2 years after the Great Flood, making him the direct ancestor of the Chaldean people. Abraham, in turn, was a descendant of Arphaxad, the son of Shem. The ancient Semitic peoples had the custom of naming their children based on significant moments in their lives. These names often reflected the circumstances they were experiencing, such as great blessings, curses, sorrows, times of abundance, and other meaningful situations. We see this repeatedly in Scripture, where characters name their children based on the experiences they were going through at the time. In addition, the Semites often named their children based on physical characteristics, ethnic traits, and even everyday events. It was common for names to reflect daily situations, giving a practical and symbolic meaning to the name. They also followed the tradition of honoring their ancestors by naming their children after grandparents, great-grandparents, and even great-great-grandparents, preserving family memory and lineage across generations. This naming practice not only reinforced family ties but also carried with it a cultural and spiritual heritage that was passed down from generation to generation, giving deep meaning to the identity and role of each descendant within the Semitic community. A good example of this tradition is when Terah named his son Nahor. Nahor was the name of Terah's father, demonstrating the common practice of passing an ancestor's name down to the next generation. This transmission of names reflects the desire to honor and preserve the memory of forebears. In the book of Genesis, we see Rachel and Leah following the same tradition when naming their children, assigning deep and peculiar meanings to those names. Interestingly, the names they chose were often expressions of gratitude to God, divine exaltations, or representations of the situations and challenges they were facing at the time. For instance, when Rachel gave birth to Joseph, she expressed her hope that God would give her even more children, while Leah, upon having Judah, praised the Lord for his blessing. These names, besides reflecting the faith and moments lived, also served as a way to mark important events in these women's lives, making their children's names not just a matter of identity but also a continuous reminder of divine interventions and the circumstances that shaped their journeys. The name Chaldean has a very ancient origin and traces back to the Akkadian language spoken by the Chaldeans. Originally, the term Chaldean comes from the ancient Akkadian word Chaldu, which is how the Chaldeans referred to themselves. The Akkadians also used this same name, Chaldu, for them. In Hebrew and Phoenician, the name Chaldean or Chaldea is recorded as Kasdim. In Aramaic and Neo-Assyrian, the term Chaldean holds the meaning of victors or the victorious, with the Aramaic pronunciation being Keksidu. This reflects the importance and reputation of the Chaldeans in antiquity, especially in military and cultural contexts. According to the fascinating Book of Jubilees, in chapter 11, verse 13, the son of Kest, was the founder of the city of Ur of the Chaldeans. He built it and named it both after himself and his father, Kest. Thus, the city became known as Ur of the Chaldeans, a tradition preserved in ancient memory and recorded in the text of Jubilees. This historical connection between Ur and the Chaldeans shows how city names, like personal names, carried deep meanings and were often used to perpetuate the memory of ancestors or important achievements in the history of Semitic and Mesopotamian civilizations. During the time of Abraham and earlier, the ancient Chaldeans, who inhabited Mesopotamia about 4,000 years ago, around 2000 BC, spoke the same language as the Akkadians, Akkadian, an Eastern Semitic language. Over time, as the Assyrian and Neo-Babylonian empires emerged, the Chaldeans underwent significant linguistic changes. By around 700 BC, they adopted Aramaic, which became the dominant language in the region. Today, the descendants of the Chaldeans primarily inhabit Syria and Iraq, especially southern Iraq. It's important to remember that over the centuries, the Chaldeans intermingled with other Semitic peoples, such as the Akkadians and other groups that occupied the region after the Chaldean period. Today, many of the inhabitants of southern Iraq, of Arab descent, are considered the cultural and historical heirs of the ancient Chaldeans. Iraq was historically also home to the Akkadians, who, according to some traditions, were brothers of the Chaldeans. While some claim that the Akkadians descended from Ashur, Others assert that they were also descendants of Arphaxad. Personally, I agree with those who support the descent from Arphaxad. I hope you enjoyed the video. May God bless you all, and I'll see you soon.